Welcome to the CNalysis podcast. I'm your host, Chaz Nuttycombe, the director of CNalysis. Today, we're going to be going over the Wisconsin legislature in the elections they have this year. Both of the chambers are solid Republican in our podcast. However, you do have a lot of interesting races in this critical swing state. The legislature, again, is not competitive, but you still have a competitive gubernatorial race, as well as some state row officer races, as well as a U.S. Senate race. Today, I'm joined by our resident Wisconsinite here at CNalysis, Blaine Monroe. Blaine, thanks for coming on.
Why, hello, thank you.
So let's start with the state Senate. That's the more interesting chamber. You have the Republicans slightly favored in our forecast to create a supermajority in the state Senate. Now, of course, supermajority in the state Senate doesn't really get them much unless they have a supermajority in the state assembly. You know, we could have a scenario where Evers wins re-election, but he may not really be able to use his veto if, on the off chance, the Republicans do create a supermajority in the state assembly, which is a bit harder of a task, but we'll get there first. So I want to go over, I think the race I want to start with in the state Senate is State Senate District 5. You have the Republican there. This is in the Milwaukee suburbs, in both Milwaukee County and Waukesha, critical Waukesha. The Republican there has said if these lines hold, these lines, which just got approved by the state Supreme Court, which were drawn by Governor Evers, that he would not seek re-election. Because of that, we have this race as a likely Democratic pickup. I believe Biden won this district by like 18 points. I can pull it up here.
There was a pretty large victory for Biden in that district, and although Democrats underperformed in that district in 2020, given that the incumbent is more than likely going to retire. It's safe to say that this is one of the few Democratic pickups that could happen in the state Senate.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be the only one. I mean, I don't really see many other good pickup opportunities. We do have two other vulnerable Republican seats. Let's go with the one that kind of has a little bit of Madison in it. You have State Senate District 13. Trump won this district by about 4 points. And the Democrat in the last time the seat was up did do a little bit better than Biden in that seat. Now, that being said, there was a third-party pro-Trump candidate that probably created that factor. But do you see that seat, State Senate District 13, anywhere on the Wisconsin Democratic Party radar? We have it as very likely Republican, so it's like a 1 in 10 chance of a Democratic win.
So it's definitely going to be one of the larger priorities for Wisconsin Democrats. However, given that there are other districts that can be used more strategically, or races that could be used more strategically to prevent Republican supermajority, I'm willing to bet that WIS Dems are more likely to spend more time and resources on those races from preventing them from flipping than to pick up this seat. It's not the most favorable seat for Democrats. It's largely rural. It extends from, like you said, Madison all the way up to Dodge County, which is, again, a very large rural district. Not something that, I've seen from WIS Dems organizing in rural areas very effectively. They've made more gains and have fended off Republicans in suburbs like Waukesha, and have continued to hold on to some northern Wisconsin seats as well. I really don't see this being the best target for them to keep Republicans away from a supermajority, but it's definitely something to watch.
Yeah, they do have a much better opportunity in the Appleton seat. That's State Senate District 19. It voted for Biden by 1 point, and it is an open seat. The Republican incumbent is not running for re-election there. We have that seat as leaned Republican. I think the Republicans are probably going to get one of the state representatives to run, and this is a area where Republicans do tend to do is a little bit better than the top of the ballot, like most of Wisconsin. But yeah, do you have any comments on that one?
Yeah, so I would say the Fox Cities area, so Appleton, Neenah, Menasha, and down to Oshkosh. It's a very interesting set of cities where you'll see very competitive races statewide. And then, that kind of trails off down ballot. You'll see with presidential election results with Oshkosh in particular. I think it voted for Clinton by 4. But it's really swingy. And Appleton's no exception to that. I can definitely see this is a really, really good opportunity for Dems. However, the Appleton area might, go with the nation with just having, no real Democratic traction, no taste for Democrats to really change that district. We'll have to see. The Fox cities are interesting. I would watch this race. Since I'm from around here, I've been hearing some things regarding sort of the feel on the ground, which is a little bit cliche, but just sort of it's a better opportunity than the previous district that we highlighted, where Democrats have been organizing in this part of the state. Sometimes they do come up short, since that's just how it is here in Wisconsin. But it is, again, one of the few areas where Democrats have somewhat of a footing that isn't Milwaukee or Madison, to put it simply.
And going back down to Madison, you have, and I believe this is an open seat, State District 15. Mm-hmm. You got a state representative running there. What's his name?
State Senate 15.
Yeah, that's the one on the border. The guy we were talking about before the podcast.
Okay. Yeah. Give me 1 second. I know with that district, that's territory that I think that combines Janesville as well.
Yes, it's got Janesville. It voted for Biden by 12. We got it as likely Democratic, and you also have a Democratic state rep there who outperformed Biden by a few points in 2020. I want to say 3 or 4 points. He's running there. But yeah, do you know anything about that seat?
Yeah, so it's super interesting because that's one of the few rural areas. I wouldn't say Janesville is rural, but outside of Janesville, where Democrats have still held on after their collapse post 2006 in rural areas. I think it's interesting that Biden did perform incredibly well in this area. And I would say, I do want to point out that Janesville was a former auto manufacturing sort of facility, I believe, for GM, sort of that small town Rust Belt sort of area. So to me, it's interesting that Biden did perform so well here. And I think that's one of the few things that we can take away from Biden's victory with down ballot races. It's that even I guess his strong suits and what Democrats should focus on moving forward is sort of the smaller communities that honestly, Wisconsin Democrats do not have a chance at rebuilding what they had with rural voters, especially in Western Wisconsin. But focusing on this part of the state, particularly, Waukesha, and then to the south of Madison, super is also a super good opportunity for Democrats to grow or at least regain the footing that they had.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got that seat again as likely Democratic. I really do see it as a kind of rural extension of Madison. But yeah, I think since they've got that state rep who outran Biden running in that seat, I think it should be a hold for him. Plus, it is more Democratic on the state level than federal. It did vote for Evers quite heavily. I want to say by nearly 20 points, if I recall correctly. Now we do have one solid Republican seat. I do want to mention that State Senate District 25 in the north.
Yes.
That has what's her name? Janet Bewley, right?
Janet Bewley. She was the former Democratic leader in the Senate. She overperformed Biden, I believe, by 11.2. And she's just been a great candidate for the district. But she's not seeking re-election. It is, again, one of the last places where Democrats have performed well down ballot in rural areas. She's held on because she's been a popular incumbent. I don't see any Democrat matching her margins or her performance anytime soon. If I'm being honest, because you've got it's very, very, very rural. The exception being a Superior, just the sister city to Duluth, Minnesota. But other than that, yeah, it's a vast rural district that Democrats probably don't have a chance at keeping.
Yeah, and the Republicans only need to have a net gain of one seat for a supermajority, correct?
As it stands, I believe so. Since they did make two gains in the state Senate in 2020, if I recall correctly. They would need one more seat to complete that. So it is entirely doable for Wisconsin Republicans to form that majority by fending off Democratic gains near Milwaukee, and then picking up this seat, which is probably the most likely pickup for them, given that it was a Trump district, very, very heavily Trump, and there's you got to find the right candidate, and Democrats don't have those types of candidates in that district.
Yeah, and Bewley barely won in 2018 in a district that is pretty similar to this one. I think it was about a point bluer, actually, and this one did go to Trump by 9. So yeah, we have this as a solid Republican pickup. But yeah, the good thing is for Democrats under these lines with the retirement in State Senate District 5, the Republicans would still really need to flip 2 districts. And that brings me to our final district, State Senate District 31 in Western Wisconsin. That's got, is it Eau Claire?
Eau Claire. So
Eau Claire. And you've got an incumbent state senator, a Democratic state senator who did win re-election there. And he's running for re-election in a Trump 3.35 district, pretty similar to the one he won in 2018. But still, we've got that one as lean Republican. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so the real saving grace for Democrats in this part of the state is if their district does include Eau Claire, and it does not include. It includes most of Eau Claire and the surrounding townships. It all really depends on, I would say at this point, college turnout. Eau Claire does have a sizable university. And with that, Democrats really need to rely on that turnout in Eau Claire, because the few other opportunities that they have for really democratic growth is basically nowhere else. If I'm being honest, they again, Democrats are fighting uphill in a district that's kind of unfavorable to them. That's sort of how it goes in these sorts of situations, but it will be extremely competitive. I have no doubt that just in general across the state, the amount of resources that will go into probably these 3 or 4 districts alone by both parties is going to vastly it's going to vastly alter sort of the political environment for the future. Really going into an unfavorable midterm for Democrats, if they can hold on to this seat, that's something that will kind of prove that there's some appetite left for rural Democrats in the state. But again, if this is a seat that's lost along with the northern district 25 that we were just talking about, then Republicans have that supermajority, and it's going to be difficult for Democrats to come back from that. Moving forward with these maps, there's I guess I'll bounce this back to you. Going forward through the rest of the decade, do you possibly see any growth for Democrats to get them out of a supermajority, if that's gained by Republicans here in 2022?
I think in the Green Bay seat, you got a Trump +7 or really Trump +8 seat, and that one did flip in 2020. The issue is, right, it doesn't unite all of Green Bay. It takes out one of the suburban districts, and puts a random rural district with it, following the old Republican gerrymander. If Green Bay were to get more Democratic, sure. And then you do, I think, have in State Senate District 8, it is a Trump +10 seat in suburban Milwaukee, and that area is, getting more Democratic, not rapidly Democratic. But, if the Republicans do win a supermajority, which we have a 57% chance of happening in the state Senate, so it's like a tilt GOP majority there. I think in a blue wave election in 2026, or it may be until a blue wave in 2030, assuming there's a Republican incumbent. I think if there is a GOP majority, supermajority created, I think it'll be one of those 2 years that it'll take for them to break it. Another issue they do have is having State Senate District 32 up in 2024. They barely won that in 2020. That's in western Wisconsin, and that area. It's kind of not inelastic. It did get a little bit bluer in 2020 because of lacrosse. So that is one factor that goes into it for whether they'd be able to break it in 2026. But yeah, well, let's take a quick break before we get into the state assembly, where you have a better shot for the Democrats at preventing a GOP supermajority. Stick with us. And welcome back. So we're going to start with the state assembly, and we're going to start with the north and work our way downstate. I want to start with State Assembly District 74. This is an open seat, one of the few seats that was won by Trump that the Democrats hold in 2020. Unfortunately, for the Democrats, the assemblywoman there is retiring. What's her name again?
Beth Myers.
Okay. So This has this is very narrowly went to Trump. I do want to get into that. We have this as a very likely Republican pickup, and this is in Janet Bewley's seat. So this is another issue when it comes for the Democrats holding that seat, is that you got two retirements here. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so this district, just looking at kind of prior election results here, just kind of trending Republican in down ballot results. It would be a tough reelection campaign for her if she were to run again. So I'm not really surprised that if Janet Bewley is retiring, that kind of the other Democrats in her sort of orbit are kind of having second thoughts. I really feel like, yeah, this again is going to be it would be a really tough district for Democrats to hold, given both the national environment and just over the time, the trends that this district has taken down ballot.
Yeah, and you have another district adjacent to it, again, inside of Bewley's seat. Now, this one did narrowly go to Biden. It went to Biden by about 1 point, Assembly District 73. The incumbent Democrat, as far as we know, is running for re-election there. However, because of the environment and the trends in this area, we do have this as tilt Republican. I want to get down to, I guess, kind of north central Wisconsin, where you got Wausau, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Wausau.
We have this as a likely Republican district. It went to Biden by 2 points, but the Republican in this district does tend to, I think he did about 7 or 8 points better than Biden in 2020. And then we also have the Collegetown-based district of Stevens Point, District 71, where you do have a Democratic incumbent who did do a little bit better than Biden. This went to Biden by 7 points. These districts aren't connected to one another, even though I think they should be. I think it'd make a lot of sense. But what are your thoughts on those two districts? We have we have the 71st as likely Democrat, by the way. I forgot to mention.
Yeah, so I will say very generally about Wausau and Marathon County. They had in 2018 they elected a Democratic mayor for the first time in a while. I believe during some of the Supreme Court races, Marathon County and Wausau performed a bit bluer than expected. Same with Tammy Baldwin's reelection campaign in 2018. So Wausau is kind of this kind of odd dynamic where it is very elastic, depending on sort of the state environment, the national environment, and it really is dependent on the candidates involved as well. Very generally, Marathon County does like women candidates, with the Supreme Court race, Tammy Baldwin, with the mayoral race there in Wausau. So I think very generally these north central Wisconsin races are something to watch for Democrats, seeing if they can kind of perform in these smaller geographical places where they have some sort of advantage over the past couple of years, where they've shown that they can perform. Wausau in particular, although not a college town, kind of more youthful than you would see in other areas of that state. Stevens Point being, a little bit of a college town, just like Oshkosh or Eau Claire. It's going to be interesting to watch that race in particular, because Stevens Point, again, college town, looking at that turnout, seeing how Democrats perform there and how Republicans can try to counter that student turnout.
All right. Well, let's go to the Bow counties, going from Green Bay to Oshkosh next. Let's start with the Green Bay seat itself. There's a very, very small chance a Republican can win it. It went to Biden by 10 points, and the Democratic incumbent here did outrun Biden in 2020. That's Assembly District 90. Again, we have it as very likely Democratic. And then we also have the 88th, which went to Biden by 4 points. That's also in Green Bay. We had that one as lean Republican. Do you have any thoughts on those races?
I think Green Bay is one of those elastic sort of areas. I think, I would agree that 90 is probably not in play. The 88, on the other hand, it does incorporate part of, or a lot of the sort of, well, it does incorporate the university there, because the University of Green Bay University of Wisconsin at Green Bay is on the east side of the bay, sort of, so just right outside of that district. So definitely something to take note of. However, it does have kind of a rural base there, kind of extending down near Denmark, not in the district, but sort of adjacent to it. So a good opportunity for a strong performance from Democrats, but I also think it depends on sort of statewide efforts and Republican priorities for organizing for statewide races. I feel like Brown County, along with Outagamie County, are going to be top targets for Republicans to drive turnout. One of the few areas that will be competitive in the state, and that really makes the difference. So if there's a lot of organizing activity in Green Bay and in the surrounding area, then I think that would be something that would make the difference down ballot.
All right. And then let's head over to Appleton. We have discussed this area and its tendencies to be a little bit more favorable for Republicans down ballot. You have Assembly District 55. This went to Biden by 0.35%. We have it as likely Republican. Do you have any comments on that one?
You'll see with Nina some more affluent areas, and same with kind of Fox Crossing, kind of these Appleton, wouldn't call them suburbs, but more surrounding villages and towns that do have more of a affluent nature to them. If Democrats can hold on to sort of Biden's success in this district, that would be surprising to me. It is just sort of a thing that Wisconsin does, that that Democratic support just does trail off down ballot. So I would be surprised if there was a strong Democratic performance, one that rivaled Biden's. I feel like the appetite just isn't there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a difficult pickup for them if Democrats want to flip it. But I think in 2024, I think you're looking at like a lean Republican race to start. Going down to Oshkosh, you have an open seat which went to Biden by about 8 points. I think we have this as tilt Democratic right now, and I want to say that's the most generous rating I see us giving the Republicans, unless they really work their butts off in this seat and the Democratic candidate isn't great, because it's not super elastic. And not only that, but Evers did better than Biden in this district by a few points. So I have a hard time seeing this district flip. That being said, when it comes to Midwestern towns like these, these are the kind of districts that are somewhat trending rightward, that Republicans are gaining in. But yeah, what's your thought on this one?
Well, Oshkosh is a college town. The incumbent Gordon Hintz is not seeking reelection. It is also one of the few parts of the state where the county party, the Democratic County Party, does have a kind of a permanent presence. They've done a good job organizing and continuing to organize in off years. And I would like to point out that in 2020, that Gordon Hintz, his opponent, was probably one of the strongest that the district could produce. And even then, it was not incredibly competitive. So it would take a miracle for Republicans to flip this. I really don't see, given that it's a college town, generally been very good to Democrats, both up and down ballot. I don't see a Republican opportunity here. I think they can focus more of their efforts on the northern Wisconsin seats and kind of defending where they're vulnerable currently. Oshkosh is just not up there.
Yeah, that's fair. And, you did point out it is a college town. And I think that is going to be one of the weaker areas for Democrats. When you're looking at approval polls, a lot of 18 to 29-year-olds don't really approve of Biden. That's one of his weakest demographics. So anytime I hear college town, state legislative district, single digit presidential level, I'm always wary of that. So that is one of the reasons that I'm a little bit more pessimistic on the Democrats than you here. But yeah, let's go over to La Crosse, House District 94. This went to Biden, according to Vest, by Harvard, by 0.05%. So there is room for error, and it could have gone to Trump very narrowly. But either way, you're talking about a few votes here. But that being said, the Democratic incumbent here did do about 8 points better than Biden in 2020. So we had this one as lean Democratic, actually. Now, that being said, if he were to opt out of re-election, and again, under the old lines, in case I wasn't clear, the old lines had this as a Trump district, a narrow Trump district. But regardless, we had this as, about 7 in 10 chance of a Dem victory. You have any thoughts on this one?
La Crosse, again, one of the holdouts for Democrats in Western Wisconsin, where they could still be competitive. It was a Trump district under the former lines, but not by much. So it not too much to add here, but I would say a good opportunity to see where kind of the Western Wisconsin voters, where their priorities are. It is kind of that example of, wow, it's just quintessentially Wisconsin. Close margin, kind of, even though very slight changes to the district, still very similar to the composition under the old lines. So will be interesting to watch, but Democrats do have it's very promising for them.
And sticking with Western Wisconsin, this is my Charlie Brown and the football district, Lucy, Assembly District 51. I got this wrong in 2018, but that being said, I was very optimistic on Democrats, or bullish, if you will, on them in Western Wisconsin in 2018. This was the only district I got wrong in the Wisconsin Assembly in 2020. And I was wrestling with myself over it. And you know what? I want to say It's because I love the Democratic candidate's dog. No, I'm kidding. But she did it. She did have a great Pyrenees dog. I do remember that, and I have one of my own back home. But yeah, this is a district that went to Biden by 6 points this time. This did get bluer. This did get a few points bluer in redistricting. If these lines were in place in 2020, based on the Republican incumbents' overperformance over Trump in that district, he would have lost still, very narrowly, but still. That being said, we had this as a lean Republican seat because of that factor. And I do think it'll still be a tight race. It'll definitely be a single-digit race. This is a seat, again, Western Wisconsin. Evers definitely won this district by double digits. He did quite well in Western Wisconsin. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I think just echoing what you said with, Evers did perform very well here. I think that's kind of the top line for Democrats. Moving forward, it could be in play in the future. Just an unfavorable Democratic midterm, probably not. You never know. It is not the most solid district for Republicans to, just sit back and not pour some effort into. But again, in an unfavorable midterm environment, it's going to be hard for Democrats for them in this sort of area of the state.
All right, and then let's go adjacent to it. You got District 45, and adjacent to that, I guess let's kind of group these together, 45 and 43. 45 is the open one where you have that state assembly, the state assemblymen running for state senate. This is, again, in southern Wisconsin, just below Madison, where the Democrats usually do better than the top of the ticket on the federal level. We have both of these seats as lean Democratic. Do you have any more comments on this region or these seats? Or
I think what I said just holds true. I mean, we were talking about the state senate district that encompasses this earlier. I think it being near Janesville, the kind of the auto manufacturing plant or former auto manufacturing plant, and kind of their constituents. I think, promising for Democrats, not as promising for Republicans. Spreitzer is running for state senate in that area. So, yeah.
All right. And then we've also got a very likely Democratic seat in this general region, Assembly District 81. This went to Biden by 10 points. This is kind of around Madison, around West Wisconsin, what have you. Do you think this is in play anymore, or do you think it's actually quite solid?
So looking at kind of the anchor communities in the district, I believe Baraboo is in there, along with Portage. So again, rural district. I think it's pretty solid. I think it's pretty solid. Not really too much movement going to go on there.
Yeah, and the Democratic state assemblyman there is one of the few incumbents who did outran Biden, so it's a very small chance. Now, one district I am interested in, this region after the riots here over the summer in 2020. I want to say that was the reason why this region got bluer in Kenosha, Assembly District 64, between Racine. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yep, between Racine and Kenosha.
Yeah, between Racine and Kenosha. This district went to Biden by about 10 points. But we have it as likely Democratic just because of the trends here, quite honestly. The incumbent Democrat did do a little bit better than Biden here, if I recall correctly. But yeah, do you have any comments on this district before we get into the Milwaukee area?
Yeah, I think with the Democratic's overperformance, I think it was by 3+ points in 2020. So yeah, I think this is good territory for Democrats. Not, I don't think it'll move too much. I think it's debatable whether the events over the summer did move this a bit blue, given that more of the rural parts of this district, as we saw, got redder. So good to keep an eye on this district. Not too competitive, in my opinion, but always something to take note of on how Democrats are doing in these sorts of geographic areas.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the Milwaukee area. This is where you have the whole suburban voter moment stuff, right? Voting for Biden, but really loves their Republican, state rep or what have you. This is kind of the story around the country. Milwaukee is very much the epitome of it. Let's start with State Assembly 21. This went to Biden by 1.6%. We have it as very likely Republican. You have a Republican incumbent here running for re-election, I believe. And then you've also got adjacent to it, you've got a very small chance, Biden plus 15.29 district in Assembly District 20, very likely Democratic. With a Democratic incumbent, obviously running for re-election. You have any comments on these?
Yeah, I think the State Assembly District 21. It's just the very southern portion of Milwaukee before getting into or nearing kind of Racine County there. Not too much to say about it. It is again kind of the prime example of ballot splitting you'll see in places like Milwaukee, where Democrats can win at the top of the ticket, but when you start going down ballot, you do see kind of a approval for Republican candidates at the state assembly and state senate level.
All right, and then let's go on to Assembly District 13. This is an open seat that went to Biden by 4 points. I believe it has parts of both Waukesha and Milwaukee County. But again, this district went to Walker by double digits. So we've got this as lean Republican. It's technically a pickup. I believe the Democratic incumbent who was here got moved over into a bluer district. So it's somewhat of a pickup. But again, this went to Walker by double digits. It loves its state level Republicans. Do you have any comments on this seat?
Yeah, so I'm looking at sort of where Walker was in the state assembly in his early career. So he was he represented areas around this. So I'm kind of not surprised that he performed as well as he did. I think with kind of the anchor city of Wauwatosa, and kind of portions of West Dallas, I think West Dallas is kind of split right down the middle between 13 and 15 for whatever reason. I think it is kind of a interesting scenario where it's kind of those suburbs, Democratic suburbs, kind of debating where they are on the political spectrum.
Yeah, I think and it is a good point. Walker did hail from this general area. So of course he did do well there. But we have that as lean Republican. Last but not least, this was one of the Democratic pickups in 2020, and I believe this district did get bluer in redistricting. State Assembly District 23 went to Biden under the new lines by 14 points, but because, again, suburban moment, it's only lean Democrat. So, yeah, do you have any comments on this last but not least seat?
Yeah, this seat was a huge target for Wisconsin Democrats. It has been for years because it's been close. I think in 2016 and 2018, it was very competitive as well. It has been one of those districts that has evaded Democrats until now. And with it getting bluer, I think this is just one of those districts that you see just Republicans will continue to lose ground.
Yeah, the Democrats did unseat a Republican incumbent here in 2020, and now they have an incumbent of their own. So I think they probably will hold their ground here, even if there is a little bit of suburban reversion. If anywhere, I think it would be that Brookfield District, Assembly District 13. But yeah, in the state assembly, we have a 65% chance of a regular GOP majority, and then a 34% chance of a GOP supermajority. So it's a little bit harder for the Republicans to create a supermajority here, but I think at least they probably will in the state Senate. But if they don't create it this year, I don't think they're going to create it at all this decade, based on the trends that are happening in the Milwaukee suburbs, to be quite frank. But yeah, well, that just about does it. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with the statewide races. Of course, when it comes to the gubernatorial election, we have this tilt Republican, and then we also have the U.S. Senate election as lean Republican. And I think how those races go would definitely affect whether the GOP gets supermajorities or majorities, regular majorities here. So that's it. Blaine, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And we are going to be back in 2 weeks with another episode on another state and its state legislative chambers. Thank you for listening. Where's the stop button?